maybe saying an intro for a fourth time now, I won't be so nervous.
I believe.
Hell yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's episode of Can You Repeat That podcast? My name is Leslie.
My name's Chantelle.
And I am Atlas.
Let's begin. Have y'all ever heard of the Dyatlov Pass incident?
I have never.
I've heard of the incident and what happened on Devil's Mountain, but I'm not familiar with the details. I never looked it up.
Okay, well, my sources for this are the History Channel, Mental Floss, and All That's Interesting. There's also a video on YouTube I watched from Nick Crowley explaining this, and they do an amazing job. To preface this, I do not speak Russian, and I'm going to do my best on pronouncing these names, but don't hate me. I'm doing my best.
Okay, we will not hate.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. So, in 1959, a group of 10 hikers set out for a 16-day, 300-kilometer trek through Russia's Ural Mountains, and unfortunately, only one would return home. How the 9 died is still a mystery, but one reason why we do know the information that we have is from the cameras and diaries that the hikers had while they were traveling. The story begins at the Ural Polytechnical Institute. The group of 10 people, who were mostly a mix of current and former students, ages ranged from 20 to 37. In my research, I found that there is some mixed information surrounding the oldest hiker, Semyon Alexander Zolotarev. One source says he's a former student. Other sources say that he was never a student there, so take that information with a grain of salt. Continuing on. Every member of this group was a certified grade 2 hiker, and when this trip was completed, they'd actually be certified grade 3, which at the time was the highest ranking hiking certificate you could get in the Soviet Union. Their goal was to get to the mountain of Goro Orton and was rated the highest difficulty. So, although most were college students or recently graduated, there was no drinking, no smoking, or drugs involved in this trip, and the dangers were taken seriously. There's a lot of dates and there's a lot of names in this, so I'm going to try really hard to keep this as the least confusing that I can. So, their journey began January 25th and hiked to a nearby village. Once the group rested there for the night, they planned to leave the following morning of the 27th. This is also where it gets a little mixed up. 21-year-old Yuri Yudin began having joint pain and he turned back around on either the first day of the hike on the 25th or the first day they were supposed to actually set out for the mountain on the 27th. So I'm not really sure which it is. But he turned around and he went home. He is the only one in the story that survived. Leading the group of 9 was Igor Dyatlov, 23, who is said to be incredibly knowledgeable, experienced, and well respected. He had told Yuri that the group would send a telegram once they had made it back from their travels, which Dyatlov have estimated to be 16 to 20 days, depending on the weather. So now there are 9 hikers. As the group made their way up the mountain and through what is now known as Dyatlov Pass, severe weather had come through and caused them to steer off course to the side of the mountain locals call Dead Mountain. Because it was late and the weather wasn't stopping anytime soon, Dyatlov decided to make camp there until sunrise and hope the weather was going to be better in the morning. We're going to fast forward a little bit and go a few weeks into the future, and Yuri had still not heard from the group and he had reported them as missing. At this time, I betcha he had never been so happy and grateful for joint pain. So, just to recap, the group left their muster point on January 25th, and it's now the end of February. On February 26th, the search party located the tent the group had stayed in, and upon investigating, found that the tent had been cut from the inside out. And with the group being as knowledgeable as they were, this means something must have spooked them pretty bad, or maybe they weren't able to get out of the tent quickly enough for whatever the reason was they needed out. But to add on to the spooky theory, most hikers had left their shoes inside the tent in negative 30-degree weather, and all 9 hikers' footprints led away from the campsite towards the woods. At this point, just expect everything I say to be weird because when looking closer, the footprints in the snow were not sporadic, but were instead extremely organized. Just these few things I've said about the campsite did not make any sense. Something panicked them so much they cut open their tent to get away without getting dressed in negative 30-degree weather. But then they walked single file line to the woods. The math ain't mathin'.
Yeah, at night in the middle of a Russian winter in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
But the math gets even worse as they found their bodies. The morning of February 27th, investigators were confident they would be finding the hikers alive, which I don't understand if they left on January 25th, packed enough for 16 to 19 days. That's February 13th. And they think they're going to find them alive February 27th. I don't know. But what do I know? So,
And they left with no shoes. So that should have been a pretty good hint.
once your feet are cold, it's over.
Yeah.
So, anywho, the morning of the 27th comes and the search and rescue groups follow the tracks in the trees. They notice one of the trees specifically had all the lower branches broken off and laying in the snow, suggesting someone maybe had tried to climb it, possibly. And also underneath this tree was evidence of a campfire or an old campfire. Next to the fire were the first bodies that they had found. So, this is where my Russian pronunciation is going to disappoint anyone who knows Russian. Yuri Doroshenko was the first body found, lying face down in the snow wearing a short-sleeved t-shirt, swimming trunks, and 2 socks with no shoes. He had a large burn on the right side of his head and on his foot. Along with that, he'd also had a gray fluid coming out of his mouth and was covered in scrapes and bruises. His ears, nose, and mouth were all covered in blood. The burns, bruises, and scrapes were all suspected to be self-inflicted as a way to end his life faster, as he was literally freezing to death. The gray fluid, however, is typically a sign that the body had experienced a strong force to their chest. So the best guess is maybe he fell out of the tree. And get ready to question the sanity of the people working this case, because Yuri's official cause of death was listed as hypothermia, and the gray liquid was not included in his initial report.
Okay.
Yes, and the burn marks don't surprise me, because if it's so cold and you're by a fire, maybe they just didn't realize that they were getting burned. So that's not too shocking.
Yeah, but a chest impact to cause that kind of dislodging of sputum should raise some eyebrows.
Yep, hypothermia. What can I say?
Uh-huh.
Yuri Krinvonshino was the second body found lying next to Doroshenko under the cedar tree wearing a long sleeve shirt and a single sock. His body was also bruised with multiple cuts as well as burns on his foot, legs, and hands. Inside his mouth was a chunk of his own knuckle, which could have been done in order to stay conscious or prepare yourself for emotional damage to stop himself from crying. Emotional damage.
Feel sad.
To add more what the heck to the first 2 bodies found, there's evidence to show that the bodies were moved after death. Now, this could have been the other members of the group moving the bodies, which I could see happening, and maybe the lack of clothes was from other people in the group dividing the clothes to layer on to stay warm, but unsure. Igor Dyatlov was the third body to be found. Face up with both fists clenched, his body was also clearly manipulated after death. He had abrasions and bruising on both ankles, cuts and bruises on his face, and was missing a jaw incisor. His injuries were consistent with a fist fight, and his official cause of death was listed as hypothermia. As far as bruising and stuff consistent with fist fights, that doesn't really surprise me much either, because if you're in a life or death situation, tensions are high. So maybe there was blame being put around as to how they ended up in this situation. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. And extreme hypothermia can cause bouts of delusion too. Oh, maybe.
Yep. And we'll get to that later on. My dog's dreaming. Leia, you sleeping?
That was so cute.
Normally she's not a sleep talker. Zinaida Kolmogorova was the 4th body found. She was dressed better than the others, but one of the sweaters she had on was torn at the right sleeve, or it was torn off at the right sleeve. She had abrasions on her hands, bruising on her face, and long bruising on her side. These injuries were consistent with being hit by a baton, maybe a tree branch, and a sign of a struggle. Her official cause of death was ruled as hypothermia. It's thought Zinaida and Dyatlov were trying to get back to their tent when they had passed away. Rustam Slobodin was the 5th body found a week later on March 5th, lying face down and covered in snow. He had internal bleeding in both of his temples and a large skull fracture. It's thought that whatever caused his fracture and bleeding in his head, he survived for up to an hour, and theorized that he became disoriented and dizzy after those injuries. Duh. And collapsed.
I'm not surprised.
His body also showed signs that he was moved after death. His cause of death? Hypothermia.
The hell it was.
Oh my God.
No.
It would be months before they found the next body. A den was discovered created by the other surviving hikers. This was the last effort made by the group to survive the cold, but unfortunately was not successful. A trigger warning for the last few bodies that they have here. It involves mutilation. It's a little more gory, so if you have a weak tummy or if you're eating, you may want to skip ahead and revisit this later. Ludmila Dubinina was the sixth body found draped over a natural ledge with running water directly next to her. She was missing the tissue around her lips and mouth, exposing her teeth and upper jaw. The soft tissue on her cheeks was also missing, exposing her cheekbones. She had 10 broken ribs and massive hemorrhaging that occurred in her heart. She was also missing both eyes and her tongue. Blood was located in her stomach, which would suggest she was alive whenever this occurred. Her cause of death? Hypothermia.
No.
I'm kidding.
Oh, God.
I'm kidding. It was listed as the hemorrhaging in her heart. Spoiler alert, she's the only one to not have hypothermia listed as her cause of death.
Good for her.
Something different. Stand out, girl.
You did it.
Eyeballs gone, tongue gone, internal hemorrhaging of heart, and blood in the stomach.
I wonder, obviously, I wonder what happened to all of them, but I wonder if the heart hemorrhaging occurred after the tongue and eyes.
I don't want to know.
That's the theme of this whole thing.
I know.
Semyon. I'm gonna go with that. Semyon. Semyon?
Sure.
Yeah.
Semyon?
Semyon? That sounds better. Okay. Semyon Zolotaryov was the seventh body and the oldest member of the group. He was found with more clothing on compared to the others. He had 3 pairs of pants on, a sweater, a long jacket, 2 hats, a scarf, and boots. His injuries included 5 broken ribs, blunt trauma to the chest, missing soft tissue on his face along with his right eyebrow, a deep gash along the back of his head, and missing eyes. His cause of death was ruled as hypothermia.
Okay. More missing eyeballs.
Yep. Both Ludmila and Simon were suspected to be alive when they had suffered the blunt force traumas that broke their ribs. Experts also say that whatever caused the broken ribs was a force so extreme it could not have been caused by another human. Their internal injuries were more similar to someone in a car accident, and despite the massive internal trauma, neither had any bruising or marks where they would have been hit to cause the internal trauma. This remains unexplained to this day.
No external bruises. Massive internal trauma. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, hypothermia. All right.
Makes sense. Moving on. Alexander Kolvatov was the 8th body found. He was near the den, and not that the clothes he had on were great for the kind of weather that he was in, but he was dressed better than most found. His jacket and pants had rips and tears as well as burn marks on his jacket and socks. He was missing both of his eyebrows, had a gash behind his right ear, a broken nose, and a deformed neck. You'd think with a snap neck they would have thought twice about his cause of death, but again, cause of death was labeled as hypothermia.
Oh no.
The autopsies in general were pretty vague and lacked detail, which seemed to be a common theme among all hikers, with some even being described as misleading. Nikolai Brignoli was the last body found. Just like Semyon, he seemed to be a little more prepared for the elements. In fact, it's thought that Nikolai and Semyon were outside of the tent when the others had fled because of how well dressed they were compared to the others. Nikolai was found with bruising on his face, internal bleeding on his forearm, a shattered skull, but hypothermia, right? Just like Ludmila and Semyon, Nikolai suffered an extreme force in order to do the damage on his body, but again, no external soft tissue damage. Just when you think, what else? I have more information for you. It's believed that the last 4 people alive had taken clothing from the first 3 in hopes of surviving. It was discovered that on the clothes the hikers were wearing and in the general area where they were found, there were trace amounts of radiation. There's no natural way this radiation could have gotten there, and to this day, there is no explanation, which leads us to all the theories.
Are Russian skinwalkers a
Flesh
thing?
pedestrians.
Sorry,
Thank
flesh
you.
pedestrians.
Some of us will leave over here and live in the middle of nowhere. So, theory number 1. In this area lives a tribe called the Mansi tribe. The first theory is that the tribe is responsible for the death of the hikers. As I stated, the storm that they were hiking through did cause them to go off course into what is now known as Death Mountain, home to the Mansi people. Some suspect that the tribe killed the trespassers while defending their land, but the only supporting evidence of this was that a chung, a symbolic structure used in sacrifices, was just a few hundred meters away, and the fact that the tribe knows the land. They could have covered up their tracks and staged the murders. Playing devil's advocate, this would explain the sudden rush to get out of the tent and single file line if they were being told to follow somebody. But to debunk this, if there were hikers' footsteps, wouldn't there have been others visible? Even if they hid them, that seems like a reach to me. And, like I had said, the force on some of the bodies was not something a human is capable of. The sacrificial structure they had found was most likely used for a moose, as there were moose antlers on top. And also, if it was the tribe, why would they hide that they murdered them? If they wanted to give a sign to stay out of their area, don't you think that they would have left evidence? They wouldn't have tried to hide it. The Mansi people were most likely just an early cop out for people like me who want to know all the things and want to know what really happened. I'm going to send y'all a picture of the symbols that were carved into a tree that one of the hikers took photos of. So this is really the only evidence that it could have been them aside from them just being in their general location. Theory number 2. This theory states the reason why the hikers fled their tents so quickly without the proper provisions was an avalanche. The area they were resting was not known for having frequent avalanches, but they were camped at the base of a mountain, so it's always a possibility. This is probably the most popular theory out there, but there's holes in this one too, and I'm going to poke them for you right now.
Like the fact that there were tracks in existence still and they found their tent?
Those with the broken bones had little to no tissue damage. If you were hit with a wall of ice, a rock, or pushed into a tree, you'd most likely have soft tissue damage. On top of that, there's also no sign of an avalanche. Although it can't be said definitively, this isn't what happened, and most professionals would also agree with that. However, it could be partially to blame. Hikers could have thought they heard an avalanche and left in a hurry, but it still doesn't explain anything else, like missing tongues and eyeballs.
Well,
So,
did she also say that Dyatlov and Zolotaryov were really skilled in like skiing, mountain hiking?
they were.
Then they probably would have known not to camp anywhere in the path of potential avalanches.
Possibly, yeah. They were all level 2 out of level 3 hikers. So I'm not, again, I have no idea. This is a popular one, avalanche, but there's some more.
But yeah, you also said that the footprints leading away from the tent were inconsistent with like running in panic and were more like
Correct.
what? So they casually strolled away from an incoming avalanche. Okay, yeah, I buy that.
Some people do. So
I can't say what I think of some people.
those two theories are probably the most logical, but still don't answer for everything that happened to the hikers. With that being said, people started turning to more supernatural causes. Theory number 3. This theory turns to Yetis being responsible for the death of hikers. The area the group had been staying in may have been home to the large and violent creature who had a problem with the hikers encroaching in their space. This could explain the reason why the hikers left in such a hurry. Mika,
Get it, girl. Get it.
she's hearing birds.
Get her.
Get him.
Go get him.
Y'all are not helping. Okay. May I continue, puppy? All right. This could explain the reason why the hikers left in such a hurry. There were a couple of photos taken by the hikers before they died in the same area they set up at camp that did have a human looking figure in it, which I will send to y'all. But it's not exactly what I personally think of when I hear Yeti. However, this photo has been proven to be 100% real with no editing. I'm going to send it to you now.
Oh, my lord.
That's one fascinating bipedal avalanche that is in that photo there.
I mean, it's something. But to disprove this, why would the hikers walk in a straight line if panicked? I love y'all, but if there's a Yeti sneaking up on me, I am running. Bye.
Yep.
Oh yeah, no, it's we're into the rules of I'm faster than the rest of you kind of
Yes.
deal.
Also, there were no other footprints found. And the radiation, Yeti doesn't make sense for the majority of the issues in this.
Maybe Russian Yetis are radioactive. I don't know.
Possibly. I mean, we don't know much about them. So, continuing with the supernatural theme, theory number 4 is aliens. This may seem like a far stretch, but there were bright lights in the sky reported on the night of their suspected deaths. Now, the term UFO wasn't coined until 1952, so maybe it wasn't a well-known term at that time, and I don't know Russian alien culture, but the descriptions that were given at the time do match the modern-day UFOs. To add to this, on the body of Semyon, a camera was found with a pretty bad water damage. Although there was damage due to water and sitting in ice for 3 months, they were able to develop the film, and it seemed like he captured some sort of light form in the sky, but these images could be damage done to the film itself.
Especially if there's radioactivity around, yeah.
Yes, people believe the UFOs made the hikers go into a trance, made them walk down the mountain. Who knows what kind of technology aliens have? I sure don't, but maybe this could explain the massive internal trauma as well as radiation.
We're not ready for humanity to know. We can't let you know yet.
Aliens seems more likely to me than an avalanche, though. I don't know. Avalanches don't have radioactive material in them, do they?
You can't speak for Russia. They did a lot of nuclear tests. Who can say what got moved around from place to place?
This is true.
And that will actually be another theory. So, theory number 5 and number 6 kind of run together. Number 5 is some people think that the entire situation was caused by a paradoxical undressing. Paradoxical undressing is when someone is suffering from hypothermia and start to feel hot. So they take off layers to stay comfortable. This leads to the person actually freezing to death due to hypothermia. According to a quick Google search, hypothermia symptoms, there is the obvious shivering, redness of the skin, and weak pulse, but also memory loss, slurred speech, dizziness, and clumsiness. What if the hikers thought they heard something, created mass panic, and ran from a non existent thought? Number 6 is actually what's known as Kármán Vortex Street. To put it in simple terms, the area around the Dyatlov Pass produces low frequency wind, which tickles the little hairs inside our ears and causes feeling of panic to many who experience it. This isn't too far of a stretch to think that a frequency can make you feel a certain way, as tons of scary movies put frequencies under their soundtrack that help promote an uneasy feeling, infrasound. While these two in combination could explain some things, what about the radiation and the internal trauma? Also, if they weren't capable of thinking rationally, they wouldn't have made fires or taken clothes from those who died before to stay warm. Also, the more people present, the more likely these two theories can be explained away. What I mean by that is not one person was like, we probably shouldn't leave the tent, you know? Like, not one person had that thought.
Yeah, especially if some of the crew was as experienced in mountaineering already. I don't know. It doesn't track.
The only thing that I think could maybe explain that last little bit is if you put there's been several experiments on this, but if you put people in a room and if everyone but one person stands up, that one person sitting down is more likely to stand up because everyone else is doing it. So if, someone was feeling paranoid, the vibes were off, maybe it did lead to a mass panic. But again, like you said, everyone was so experienced. So I don't know. The math still ain't mathin' for me. Theory number 7. The Soviets covered everything up.
There it is. I was waiting for the military cover-up theory.
After this happened, the story was buried for 3 years, and once it was released, there were lots of inconsistencies in the reports and autopsies. A lot of what we know from this case comes from early Soviet reports, so maybe this entire thing has been messed up from the beginning to prevent the truth. Going back to previous theories, maybe it was a Yeti and they wanted to cover it up. One of the search and rescue groups actually found a boot print within the hikers' single file trail. Maybe the hikers got too close to something the government didn't want them to see and ordered them to walk towards the woods. This was during the Cold War. Maybe they developed more weapons and needed someone to test it out on. Or during tests in which they often did in remote areas, it scared the hikers, causing them to panic and run. That could explain the radiation in the area, but again, not really the internal damage.
Out of all the theories you mentioned so far, secret Russian weapons testing and paranoid cover-up kind of seems the most logical.
Yes, I'd have to agree with you. Because going back to that photo, I don't know, it doesn't
Could be a soldier in armor and winter gear now that I'm looking at it.
This is true.
Kind of like giving you guys a what the fuck are you doing here look.
Yes, that's what I was just about to say. Exactly. So I lean more towards that one too. It makes more sense. That's pretty much where I am. So over the years, there's been approximately 75 theories. As of 2019, the case has been reopened and only 3 theories are being considered possible, which all involve natural phenomenon. These three are avalanche, snow slab, and hurricane. That's right, hurricane.
Hurricane
Hurricane.
in the Ural Mountains
In the Ural Mountains.
in winter.
In the winter.
No.
Yep.
No, that wasn't a question. That was just an emphatic no. I don't buy it.
Mm-hmm. This case is one of my most favorite. This is originally what I wanted to do for episode number 1. This case trips me up. It's just weird. And I can't imagine what they went through, honestly.
Same. Yep.
It's so sad. And I mean, even if they were just too close to something that the government didn't want them to see, why the torture with cutting out their tongue and their eyes? Well, I guess Soviet
Because
Russia.
Soviets? Yeah, let's just say. We could do a week's worth of episodes on some of the hinky shit the Russian military did that we know about.
Yeah. So, did y'all learn anything? Did y'all enjoy your story?
I've learned that I don't want to go to the Ural Mountains anymore. There is no one theory that explains everything, except maybe Russian military cover-up for secret weapons. That one seems the most plausible to me.
What was the wildest thing to y'all?
There's not a wildest thing. It's okay. They fled from an avalanche, but while they're leaving the tent seems panicked and disordered, cutting through the sides of it. Their tracks lead away in a single file and ordered line. The fact that they apparently camped in the path of a known paths of avalanches, which experienced mountaineers know to look for, doesn't make sense. Injuries that are not consistent with the cause of death, it was said. Injuries that are not consistent with the cause of death that probably happened based on the other injuries. Evidence of being alive with internal hemorrhaging that should have killed you. Missing eyeballs. Yeah, no, and distorted and no external. And on the three that obviously died of extreme body trauma, no external bruising, which you would have gotten in an avalanche or a fist fight or being beaten with something. Yeah, no, there's
Yeah, I think those are the bodies that trip me up the most because that's kind of wild.
The distorted neck is really skipped over because of the wow factor of the other things. I don't know. If you fall and break your neck, maybe your neck's bent a little funky, but distortedly like implies that just looking at them, 100% something is wrong.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Russian military cover-up or skinwalkers. Those are my theories.
Flesh pedestrians, thank you.
Sorry, Leslie. Flesh pedestrians.
We'll have to cover them one time too.
No, we won't. We don't talk about them.
We don't talk about them. We don't say the hard S. We say flesh pedestrians here in this podcast.
I kind of feel like if we do that too much, they're going to learn like how a dog learns how to spell out and walk.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're just in trouble because then we have two things we can't call them without attracting their attention.
We'll think of something else. Leave a comment. What should the alternative to flesh pedestrians be? Shanty, what was your favorite theory?
My favorite one or the one I think it was the most?
Both.
I have to say, my favorite one was probably the Yeti because I love stories about the Yeti and how wild some of them are.
Mm-hmm.
The one I think it was the most military cover-up.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easy to say avalanche,
Yes.
but the bodies don't fit that.
Correct. And I never really put together, like I saw that picture and I was like, that just doesn't look like a Yeti to me.
No.
Mhm.
And if it was a Yeti, you think they would have been running immediately, but they stopped and took a picture of it.
Yes.
So maybe it was a person. I don't know. But
And have other tracks.
yeah, and plenty of them. Because why would it cut
I'd
it?
also expect non-human tracks.
Yes.
If there's something, especially if some of the bodies were moved after death.
Yes, but that could have been the other, people. So
The apparently also at the same time panicked and delirious hypothermic people
oh yep, you're right.
had the sense of mind to move people. And there's no one theory that fits all of it. You can point to any one part of it and go, yeah, but that doesn't fit.
Mhm.
Also, they found these bodies at separate times. Do we know how far they were from each other?
There is a link or a map I'll post on there.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Moral of the story: don't go to Russia. I guess I don't know.
Well, thank y'all so much for joining.
Sorry for the trauma.
Yeah, sorry for the trauma. Don't forget to rate and review our podcast. We're available wherever you listen. If for some reason we're not, let us know and we'll upload it. And rating really helps us out. If you have a topic suggestion or a story you want to share, email us at cyrtpod@gmail.com. Any pictures that went with today's story will be posted on our Instagram at cyrtpod. And we will see you next week.